Each month in 2020 at our Agile PDX Puppet events, we've taken one of the 12 Agile principles and explored what they mean for our work today, inside and outside of software. In June, we explored the 6th Agile Principle. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Our session host, Line Mørkbak, kicked us off with the question, what is characteristic of the online work environment?
At this point, I've chosen to turn my video off so I can have a little bit of not always being like on and looked at time.
Yeah.
Because it's new. We go to meetings in person and we sit and we watch the presenter, but now everybody's watching us all the time.
Suddenly we are, and we watch ourselves, like I have a teenager, whenever I take her to a restaurant, she look at herself in whatever reflection that's from a window or something, right? And that's what it comes, because like we're looking at ourselves all the time. We're like, so that self-consciousness also kind of pops up, right? Like, oh, I'm constantly on, even though of course we're on in our face-to-face meetings, but there's a different piece there, because we're on the screen. Also hearing some comments around solution orientation from you, Jennifer. Can you say a little bit more about that? What is that? Why does that solution pop out for you?
For me, on my experience with video collaboration, as someone else had mentioned, is that we're more quick to focus on exactly what it is that we need to meet about, rather than kind of the jibber jabber that might come with a face-to-face meeting.
Mm. So that then becomes more solution oriented as well, right? Like focused in what are we here for? What do we need to be honing in on?
Exactly.
Yeah, good. But then I also hear not fully engaged. There's actually less focus. There's tech issues. A lot of tech issues there, but also there's lack of interruptions. So, and then the isolation. Aspen, can I hear a little bit more from you in terms of the less focus? What distractions or what makes it less focused in your experience?
Well, I don't know if you noticed earlier, but about 5 minutes ago, my 5-year-old just walked in and was showing me her leg that was bleeding, and and trying to take care of her while she's bleeding, but also be participating in a meeting.
So it's those distractions, because part of being online is that we're in our homes, and if we're not necessarily always set up for like a home office that can kind of put those distractions away, right? Yeah.
And it's difficult to be present in both worlds.
Yeah. Good point. Several people are mentioning tech issues. Dave, can I ask you, what are some of the tech issues that pop up for your team?
Well, I collaborate globally with our teams, and sometimes it could be just good connections. So a lot of people are working from home, whether it be in China, Vietnam, wherever, and their connectivity may be slow. So when they're trying to present something and there's not a good connection, it's okay. I got pieces of that, so that continuity during the meeting can be interrupted. And you're constantly asking, oh, can you repeat that? And you kind of lose some momentum as you go through. So that's part of it. Yeah,
good. Thanks for sharing that. And I think connectivity doesn't have to be a global issue, but often it can be a global issue, like when our colleagues are from many different parts of the world. Yeah, good. Kate, I'm curious about the trust piece that you just mentioned here. You can't see you doing the work, so we're trusting each other in a different place. Is that trust coming up, or is it lacking? Do we need to build it more strength? What's your experience as trust pops up as we're in the online space?
I think in my line of work, in particular with my company, we needed to relearn communication styles that previously may have just been a drive-by request for a change. And now, depending on how we communicate, can we trust others to do the work, or do we now need to have even more meetings than necessary to ensure that you're doing the work? So we're finding that balance.
Yeah, good. and one of the things you're pointing out here is like are we having even more meetings, right? Like, and that's definitely something I want to dive into in terms of how we can make those meetings be more efficient and hopefully less of them, because I think as Liz was pointing out, that it's fatiguing when we're on that screen and it just becomes a blur. There was this meeting and that meeting, but I didn't move, and they were all here and some of the same colleagues, right? I didn't move into one room, and there wasn't, you know, like, so it just becomes this this kind of blur. Good. So just kind of wanted us to get started on some of these reflections on what stands out in your online experience right now. One of the things that is my big pet peeve, I worked in an online capacity for 15 years. My first publication was a fully Skype book between me and my co-writer, co-author. So the online premise has been something I've been taking on for many, many years. Of course, now many of us are, and many of you also maybe not have had that previously, but with our global pandemic, that is now where we're working. Some of the things that I think is important is to really be aware that when we're online, it cannot just be business as usual. We can't just take all our previous face-to-face experience and dump them into a Zoom room. We have to think broader about how we're coming together, and that's kind of why I was looking at that trust piece as well, because in my experience that way that we're coming together with our humanness is lacking. So we have to compensate. We have to be very intentional about creating those connections instead. So when we're coming together in a face-to-face environment, we're not even conscious of how we're connecting with each other. It's like, oh, it must be raining outside. You seem like you're wet as you bike to work today. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in a rush. I just had to drop off my kid at school this morning. Or, oh, did you get the coffee right around the corner? I mean, there's all these things that we're connecting on very naturally when we come into the same space, in terms of just chit chat, human interaction, tuning in with people's moods, where they're at. That is lacking when we're in that online space. And we need to be, sometimes can seem a little bit silly, but we need to be very specific in terms of creating that, like, we're arriving here, who are you, what are we doing, where are you coming from, what's up. And I just want to do like a little activity where we can kind of show a little bit of that, or just do a little bit of that. But before that, I want to pull up this HBR study just to show the importance of it, because their study was showing that the teams that were outperforming other teams were the ones where the social time really was embedded in the team, and that's where they were high performing teams. This was not a study that was specifically focusing on virtual or in person. It was just looking at all teams. But what was interesting about this study was that it's actually not how people were engaging in things that were scheduled in meetings, but the outside engagement, the water cooler conversations, the informal connection points and dialogues that people had. So what's critical then is, like, when we come together online, how do we even create that? Because it doesn't come natural. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's interesting that it's not in all those tons of meetings that we're put into. That's actually not really what becomes a predictor of our success. So that's one argument when we want to get back to our team lead or other people in our organization, or just our team, to say, could we start to minimize some of these meetings and find other ways that we're actually sharing information and have these connection points. And we'll link that a little bit more to the sixth principle as well. But on that notion, in terms of how can we cultivate those connections and being intentional about it, I want to do just a little virtual icebreaker. I put some different visuals up here, and I want you to locate the annotation function in Zoom. And if you're not familiar with it, it's when you go into view options, and then there is a drop-down menu, and one of those is annotate. So what I would like you to do here is you can either draw, or you can also put a stamp. or you can write your initials, whatever. I want you to just indicate as you're looking at these images, which one of these images represent your current mood and energy level right now? So I can see some people are clicking the stormy clouds. Some people are clicking or drawing on the like being kind of vulnerable or being like all kind of internal. Others having this team high five. Others are the little girl who's out. Others are in the candy store. Yes. Good. So just interact with the images in whatever way you want, in terms of a check mark, a little drawing, or a little and I can see also Kate is adding to the whole notion that we were just talking about, that a lot of these discussions that we're having as we're online is that everything becomes transactional. Like, here's a task, do this, do that, instead of the social time, right? That we need to feel that we're actually working together, and we need to make that social time. I could not agree more. And there's something about, and that's where the online space really becomes, if we're not careful, becomes that, oh, we can be so focused, we can be so effective, but what is actually characteristic of our effectiveness? Good. So let me hear from some of you. A couple of you made a little mark on the spiral case that's going down. Let me just hear some reflection on that. Why is that a good indicator of your current mood? Anyone who put that, mark the spiral staircase going down?
I really like logarithmic spirals, and to me they signify growth mindset because they're just incrementally improving upon each one. So I like that.
So you are ready for the growth. Yes, good. And then I'm curious for the people who have indicated anything around this this little girl like hiking out on the out the road. Why was that something that spoke to you?
Isolation.
Isolation. Yeah, say a little bit more.
Just feeling like I'm out here on my own, you know, trying to make it work, and it's difficult.
So that feeling of like I'm by myself and I've got my you know, my pet bunny there, or
Yeah.
my stuffed animal, but I don't have my team with me. I don't have anyone to support me. So that isolation is team missing, manager missing, those kind of things. Feeling that's where it becomes isolating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Other indicators, because that image can be many different things. I think those other people who indicated that, are there other things in the other end of that, or additional things to the isolation that Zena is presenting here?
So for me, it is on my road to somewhere new. So
Yeah.
You know, I've got my favorite stuff, and I'm going ahead, and here we go.
Yeah, good. And maybe mom and dad said I should be in a certain place, but guess what? I'm heading out and and that way. Yeah, but both things, right? So one thing that I like, and we're not going to talk about all these, but it's but one thing that, and it's just to give you an example of icebreaker, but also what images can do for us. First of all, we're looking less at each other right now. We're looking at these images, so we're getting a pause. But we're also getting an opportunity to use another part of our brain instead of just being focused on like how am I describing things if I'm describing it in words in a chat, and it is also a way to get that. Where people at, like a social connect, but also a temperature check. We are at very different times, and a lot of our team members are deeply affected by what's happening in the streets of our country right now, and these are some ways that we can also make sure that we are connecting with that in a respectful way. Of making sure that people can express where they're at. And if we can see that there's a lot of things there's a lot of thunder clouds that are being like, we might need to look at our agenda for this meeting and check into what's happening for our team that we might need to be focusing on, instead of just being very strict on that agenda that we had up front. Good. So I'm just going to clear our drawings here again, but just a little example of how we can do some of these cultivate some of these connections. Here's some other ideas of how we create water cooler moments intentionally. We can have some icebreaking questions that's not work related. Now we had them being visuals. We can do what I call take 5, that we're starting our meetings with, like, what is going on? Are people running straight from another meeting? Are they in the middle of a launch that's failing? Do they really not have time to be in this meeting? Are they super excited about what happened? They want to celebrate that with the team. Like, are we taking, and those are things that would typically, we would read that energy if we were face to face. We could sense that anxiety or that excitement when people come into that meeting room. So sometimes we can use that technique of just taking 5 to connect and see what's up. It shouldn't be 15 minutes, but it can just be those 3 or 4 minutes as we're coming together. Virtual coffee breaks can be something that we can be very intentional about scheduling, so that we're scheduling unstructured time where we're just coming together for whatever. No one is particularly facilitating it. And what I've seen is that when teams start doing virtual coffee breaks, people will step up in true kind of co-creation fashion. Someone's going to bring some music, someone has a joke, someone has a game, someone want to talk about coffee and their newest coffee brands, whatever, but it's unstructured time, but we're making sure that we're carving that time out. So it might be like 20 minutes every Thursday at a certain time, that invitation is there. Anyone can drop into that Sokoko meeting, Zoom meeting, whatever platform we're using, where we're just connecting with each other, and it's not a handoff on task. We can also, especially if we're in more leadership positions, team leads, managers, make sure that we're available and we're signaling that we are available. So that can be that we are once a week, once every 2 weeks, that we have office hours where our door is open. You can just drop in, that meeting invite is open, everyone, the team has it, and me as a team lead, I'm ready to just talk to you. I'm working on other things if no one's there, but that 1 hour or those 2 hours is available for my team. For whatever people want to come to me with. So those are examples of how we can create some of these connections. Again, I'm curious in terms of what might be something that on these notes that you want to be using yourself. So again, if you want to do the annotation, which is on your view option, and you drop down and there's the option of annotate, and just to kind of make a stamp or a little check mark of which one of these could you be inspired to try with your own team. There's some stars coming on here, I can see. Good. And I can just see, I'm looking at the chat here, I can also see that John said that there is definitely stormy times right now. There's a lot of, it's interesting times, and things are stormy. Nothing is just settled and easy. Thanks for adding that, John, as a reference to where we're at right now, but also to the images that we looked at right before. Thank you. Good. So those of you who thought that having this open door policy or having these drop-in office hours are interesting, or something you might be inspired to try, say a little bit more about that, and then and also, like, why is that important as we're agile teams also?
I think one of the things that stands out to me about the drop-in office hours is we really don't have that time to collaborate, and making that time available to others to say, I'm going to be available to do collaboration, whether you want to do programming or discuss an idea or think about ways that we can change the way we're operating as a team. Whatever you want to do, if you have a drop-in hour, you can I see that as a time where you can do anything and be available and still have opportunity to get work done, but focus time for those kind of things.
Yeah, good. You actually almost like bringing this to the next level, right? For you, it sounds like what you're talking about is not just for a team leader of a manager to have their door open, but thinking of more like scheduled time in our team calendar where we're actually doing, collaboration at peer-to-peer or the whole team, right? Like, so that we're not just ending up and that we don't have to schedule that and be like, oh, we should bounce back these ideas back and back. We might schedule that, but that there's time for the team as such, that this is our 2-hour window where we're collaborating. We can jump into different rooms depending on what conversations people want to have on certain topics or certain projects. I like that. I like that very much. Great points. Someone also, let's say, Dave, you pointed out that take 5 is something that's relevant. Can you say why does that seem like as something that could be beneficial in your team context?
Well, I think any time that whether you're coming together as a group with a team that you know, maybe some folks are coming in that you don't know, it's an opportunity to really find out, hey, what's happening in your group, or how are things going for you at home and whatnot. It provides some context and also makes people real. It gets away from the transaction a little bit, and I love to see people like their kids running around in the background or whatever. It humanizes your meeting a little bit. So, hey, how old's your daughter and so forth. It just breaks things up a little bit, because there's plenty of time to get down to the business, but let's be humans first, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And if it becomes part of our meeting flow that we're just spending those 5 minutes, and that people also can see, oh, it's not 15-20 minutes, we're still focused on our agenda, but we are connecting on those pieces. And especially as we're working in a global setting, I think we as in North America, we definitely want to have these social connecting points. But if we're working with colleagues in Latin America, colleagues in Asia, in Middle East, they're typically having even a bigger need for focusing on those social connections to actually get into the task, and being very transparent in their meetings as well, and being direct and actually being explicit about their thoughts. So for us to connect with people, we're going to have people to actually open up more during our meetings. So it's also another way of having a different invitation. I often talk about when we're in a virtual context, we want to go slow to go fast. And we go fast to go fast. That we're like, oh, we only have an hour, we have this agenda, we need to go into this. And we're not really trusting that we'll have enough time for what we need to do. But if we're taking those 5 minutes, if we're honoring to go slow to go fast, we're building a little bit of those connection points. And not only in our meetings, also as we're building a team, but in the mini format of our team, in our team meetings, I think it can be something important to be aware of, and kind of trust that we will get there, and it's worth that little slow to go fast, like that, those connection points for us to then know that people are going to be more transparent, feel they're invited to be critical for the discussion we have up front, and we're not just hearing the usual extrovert, direct, confident speakers, that we're going to have more voices from our team pop up. Because that's one of the things that also it can become a huge challenge in the online space, is that there's certain voices that are dominating more than others, and it's harder for us as we're facilitating meetings, or as we are team leads, or as we're colleagues, to make sure that those voices who have a different temperament, that they're also being heard. So to go slow to go fast can actually help us quite a bit, in my opinion. Good. So let me just make sure that I'm moving forward here. I kind of was diving right in on intentionally that we're spending some time here right in the beginning. So just a little bit more about me, some of the things I said already, but the company I work for, and some of the, which is my company, and and some of the work that I do. Leap Lab is a project around future of work. If any of you are interested in that, you can follow that on Medium. But what we want to be looking and discussing today is, preferring to work in person, yet I'm functioning with the physical distancing restrictions that we have right now, and diving into that discussion of the 6th Agile Principle. So let's just look at our 12 principles, and I know that you are diving in on all 12 of them over this year. The 6th one is, as you're probably aware of, the most efficient and effective methods for how we're conveying information to and within a development team is to be face-to-face in our conversation. So we want to dive into that conversation, and what I spent this first little time on is to get a little bit more of a sense of what is our online space, what are you experiencing out of our online space, and also the social opportunities that we can utilize even more in our online space. But as we're now looking at that 6th principle, I want to ask you, is it still timely and relevant, and why or why not? I actually, I'm going to stop sharing here, because instead of just we'll have an open conversation here in our meeting, but I also want you to get a chance to add stuff in a Jamboard. So I just put a link in the chat for a Jamboard, and I will just open it up so you can also see it here. Actually, it's not on the right. Let's look at the first board. Oops, no, our second board. I have my images in there as well. If you're not familiar with a Jamboard, it's super simple. Over here, you can click a sticker, and then you can start writing, and you can add your comments in there, and it comes up, and then you can delete it again if you need to. So just want to take a couple of minutes here for you all to, I'm on the second board here. That's what I am sharing, but feel free for you. I can see several of you are in here and joining now. Perfect. But feel free to grab a sticky note and add some of your thoughts. Is that 6th principle still timely and relevant? Why or why not? And I'll give you some more quiet air time here, airwaves, as you're reflecting and adding some of your thoughts. I want to make sure that people can, I hope I've done the right sharing, because I don't see anything yet in here. Are you all able to open it? Yeah, there we are. Good, good. I just want to make sure that I didn't have good. Great. Good. So invite some more folks to start adding things in here. Good. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to make it that big. Sorry, that got really big. Sorry, we need to figure out how to make this a lot smaller so it's not dominating everything. It's a good idea, but it's not the only idea. Good. Okay, I'm just gonna try and find out. Yeah, okay, good. Let's make sure we get that comment in there again, and then at a good size. Good. Good. So I like the very different comments, right? So face-to-face optimal, especially for things like retros and brainstorming. Some tools are okay for stickies, but still enjoy the live or the face-to-face. Great. And then we have in the green next to is it still relevant if we're willing to redefine what face-to-face mean? My team is and has been fully remote, so I could use words like synchronous in real-time live chat alongside face-to-face. I like that. Like let's redefine what face-to-face is. That notion of actually feeling that we're coming together and hearing each other, and where that's coming from originally is being addressed here. Great. Yes and no also. Yes, because some ideas can flow more freely when amongst others rather than waiting. Good. Waiting for a meeting to discuss. No, because a majority of work is completely independent. Good. And then someone is simply just stating, I work remotely, so 6 Principle is not relevant for me. I work remotely and trust that. Good. So someone is saying, I'm an introvert and work with IT folks who are good with Zoom sessions. So then say a little bit more about that. So that means that then it works better for you, or it works not so good with you?
It works better for me.
It works better for you. Can you say a little bit why?
I guess, well, I use, is anybody familiar with Jira?
Yeah.
I use that, and I use Confluence, and I use Microsoft Teams. And they seem to really like communicating, you know, posting on Microsoft Teams or Confluence. They like going in and updating their tasks. And, you know, we have 2-week sprints, and then every few days we have a stand-up, which is a Zoom session. And they respond really well to that.
Yeah. So those range of tools that you're mentioning here really works well, right? Because it becomes a combination of those tools being used.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And then someone is also saying that something about the openness. It's relevant. It's certainly less relevant, but in my experience, a certain level of openness is required to foster trust and respect. Can you say a little bit more about that, the person who said that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that was mine. So I worked on a remote team at my last role, and I think there's still a lot of things. So, and the company was based in DC. We would travel back once a quarter to see each other, and we actually had some FaceTime every 3 months. And I think that was really important still, because there's just a certain, when you're working remotely, you're in your own world, if you will, and we may connect through video, but we do so much through our computers. There's a certain lack of personal connection that you get when you're actually face to face. And I think that's what this principle kind of is trying to get at, or one of the aspects. And I don't think you can completely replace that being remote. So for example, when if you send like a text, or if you have a short exchange in Slack or something, the things that replace, like, people are more open to interpreting what that means within the context of what they're doing. And when you're face to face with someone, you're really sharing an environment. You're really together experiencing the same surroundings, and you're more likely to have your complete focus and like that kind of connection of commonality and experience that you're having. And I don't think you can completely replicate that remotely. That's been kind of my experience with the last role too, that developing that trust and connection where you really understand where someone's coming from is more work. And when you're busy doing technical and other things, it's harder to carve out that bandwidth for that. And that's where being in person, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. Good. kind of carve what you're saying here, also like carving that time out intentionally to be socializing, or also and then doing it, getting face to face every 3 months or something, so we're not forgetting that piece, and we're still making sure that that becomes there, right? Yeah. Anyone else want to say it? I mean, I think these are great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these are being saved. I'm going to put them into the slide deck that I'll share with Neil afterwards, and he can share with all of you. I pulled some of these out, but that was just kind of what popped out for me. Anyone else who want to step in and say a little bit more about what they put in here, what this question of is it still relevant and timely pops up for them?
Hi, this is Jamie.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
I think it took me a while to figure out where my mute button was. With my team, we already have a lot of the tools in place, so it really wasn't a big stretch to go remote. The little things that we have trouble with is people, you know, it took me at least a month before I'd even go on video, because I don't even like seeing myself in the mirror, let alone on video. But I still have team members that don't want to do it, you know, and I'll ask them that, you know, could you just do video, because we have the interns here now, and I really like to see so that they can see who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think they don't have to do it all the time, because I don't do it all the time. Especially late in the evening, I'm yawning, and I'm so embarrassed yawning all the time. But I think it hasn't really affected what we do that much. I think we're doing really, really well, and we wouldn't have any problems. But at the same time, the isolation, I think, is really getting, because this is different. It's not just being remote. It's, you know, there's restrictions on it.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who didn't really work remote 100% before, and then going remote at a time of a global pandemic where we also couldn't leave our houses, and it's very different, right? Like, which is a lot of the peers that I am having conversations with, a lot of us was like, yeah, let's make sure we're sharing with everyone. This is not really, oh, now we're all working from home, that's easy. But it's like, okay, let's make sure we're also, what does this look like in 6 months? Which is like, because in the beginning, I think people were like, oh, this works, we can be on Zoom, we can do it, we're okay. But it's the long haul. And that's that isolation. What we also heard from before was like, it's also in the long haul of like, are we connecting with people? Are we making sure we're forgetting? Are we getting fatigued? Are we getting isolated? Are we still getting a sense of each other in the long haul, right? So thanks for bringing that up. And also the point of like, even if we're not super comfortable with video, at least once in a while we'll have to use it in terms of getting those connection points with our colleagues. Good. I'm going to stop sharing in here and want to just, and as I said, I'm going to make sure that these points here get thrown into the slide decks as well. I want to share a couple of other things in terms of where I can see that we can bridge the gap. Someone was just saying about we need to connect our worlds, right? And what came up also is like, well, we want to make sure we're not just handing off tasks, that we're actually collaborating. Another thing that came up for many of you in the beginning was like a lot of meetings, back-to-back meetings, you know. So one thing that is really close to my mind in terms of how we can be better in the online space as we're agile teams is in terms of how we're looking at our meetings. And someone was already talking about, well, we're synchronous or we're asynchronous. So I kind of want to pull that in, because one thing that's very key in my point of view for the online premise is that we're beyond same time and place. But one of the things that we tend to be doing is to not really utilize that fully. And that is not really utilizing fully the asynchronous momentum that we can get in our collaboration. So we, in my point of view, we need to reinvent how we're using some of our meeting practices and utilizing a broader spectrum of channels. which I'm sure that many of you are doing already, but I want to give a couple of examples of how that can really look to kind of give you some ideas of how we can make our meetings more focused and also shorten them and utilize those asynchronous channels a little bit better. One big piece is that we need to make sure that our agendas are not all over the place, that we really should have 1, max 2 purposes per meetings. And that, I mean, fairly strict. So if I'm getting a meeting agenda, and in that agenda, there is like, oh, we are welcoming our new team member, Azim, so we're going to do a little bit of team building activity for him. That's part of our agenda. Another thing is that Lisette is going to share some experience from the past projects. So she has a presentation, a PowerPoint that she's sharing with us. Then we're going to be brainstorming on what we want to do with our project based on that information from Lisette's. And then in the end, we want to make a decision. So if I get that meeting invite, that's already way too many agenda points in my point of view. We can be a lot more strict here, in my opinion. So let's look at the first one, which was here, the team building. I think that's a separate meeting. Let's set up a meeting, 20-minute meeting, where we're welcoming Azim to our team. We're doing a little team building activity. We're sharing our team charter with him. Whatever, but we're doing a separate meeting on this team building where we're welcoming him. So now that's out of the other meeting agenda. It's its own simple meeting focused on that, short and sweet, but with that focus. Let's look at Lisette's presentation. Do we all need to be online at the same time to get that information from Lisette? I don't think so. She can send that PowerPoint ahead of time. Or better, she could have created a little video where she's talking about those points in her in that presentation of what is it that we need to know from her experience from that past project that we need to be aware of. That of course needs to be sent out good time ahead, but that knowledge sharing piece could be shared asynchronous. What about our brainstorming? Does that have to happen in the meeting? And again, I don't think so. We could open up a Trello board, a Padlet board, Google Doc, where based on the Lisette's presentation and previous information that we have and points we have about that project, we could start that brainstorming already. So now actually what we have left is this point. Let's have a 30-minute meeting where we're making a decision. So now we weaved out all this. We have 2 short meetings with 2 different agendas, and then we have some asynchronous stuff happening in between. I just want to open up the chat as I can see several people are writing in there. I want to make sure that I'm getting that in here. It does require a lot of out-of-the-box thinking about how to utilize tools. You're right, Neil. And those video presentations could be something we could do, but it allows for more collaboration. But of course, it means some of us we need to like step out of our comfort zone if we're starting recording things ahead of time, for example, right? And we start to rethink. We have to rethink of how we're actually doing our meetings. What's the point here is that we're actually looking at our meetings as a whole process and not a single event. And you might have seen a model like this in one way or another previously, but what the idea here is that we're having things that's before our meeting, then are things that are happening during our meeting, and then things that are happening post. When we're face-to-face, we're spending typically 80–90% of our time during, and that's okay because we come together, we have coffee and cake, we have each other's ideas to bounce back off, we can stand up, we can do things on whiteboards, on flip charts in that space. But when we are online, we can't, if we're having these back-to-back meetings, then we get fatigued and it's not going to work in the long run. So really, here's some percentages that I think we should go for instead when we're having our online meetings. About 50% should actually be thrown out into this, not thrown out as in the garbage, but moved into the prior phase. And 20% into that post phase. And then we have 30% that's that one purpose for that one meeting where we want to focus our time. So we're giving ourselves some time back to have those reflections, to have that collaboration with our team instead of sitting online and viewing Lisette's presentation because we don't have to spend our time on that. What really honor out in the prior phase, which is what's out here in the prior and the post, that's the asynchronous. And what we're having in our during is our synchronous, same time and place. And the asynchronous is where we're getting beyond that. What we're also honoring in my experience is that prior phase, the asynchronous, is honoring, we talked about a little bit before, is honoring a lot more different kind of voices coming to the table. Because people, many of us get very creative when we can bounce off other people's ideas. If we can sit with something and then add it to that board tomorrow, if we can see what other people are doing, and then we can have a chance to then reflect based on what they were saying. Instead of when we're doing a brainstorm, which is during, which is same time, it's the ping pong. And then it's a certain kind of personalities who's going to do most of that ping pong. What about those people who are really be like, yeah, I have an opinion, but I really want to make sure I'm connecting with my team or a couple of colleagues to test that idea or to see what they think before I want to express my opinion. This would be very classical for our colleagues in Asia, that they're not just going to speak from that egocentric individualistic I. They want to make sure they're speaking on behalf of a we. So if we give them time in that asynchronous phase, they have to have time to gather that we thought, and then they can add some of those thoughts in. So there's many things that we actually get by utilizing this asynchronous and synchronous space a lot better. I want to quickly walk you through I want to look at our time because I want to make sure we have a breakout room where we can breakout discussion. We can talk a little bit more about what this looks like, but I want to give you some examples of what it could look like. And this is like a artificial, agile dream team, where here, they are using in their prior phase, they're having a proposed agenda that's in a Trello board, and then people are adding their points to that. Any presentations are shared before at a PowerPoint or video, and then they're using Slack for also that communication prior to their meetings. During their meetings, they're always having 10 minutes that any meeting is starting at the top of the hour, but 10 minutes before, people can start dropping in, and then they're having those 10 minutes for any social chit chat they need. You can see this is a team that have 5 different nationalities, so they're bridging those different kind of cultural temperaments. So that social connect is important for them. So they are 10 minutes before the meeting is open, and anyone can just chit chat and have on kind of unstructured time, and the top of the hour, then the meeting starts. They rotate their facilitator also, which means that different ways of facilitating is going to be presented, different ways of gathering input, and also everyone's online skills in terms of facilitating is being strengthened because everyone is taking turns at being the facilitator of their conversation. They're sharing slides in Zoom or Sokoko. And then they're doing all the rest respective in Retrum and doing them asynchronous in a post phase. So that's an example of how one team are doing them, some of their meetings. These are just some screenshots of Zoom and Sokoko, as well as Retrum, just to show some like a kind of portfolio of tools you could start using as you were doing conversations like this. I'm not going to dive into this example. Instead, I want to actually pause. In a minute, we want to go into breakout rooms, but I want to just pause here. I'm going to put my phone or my timer here just for a minute to just get you grab pen and paper or just kind of yourself reflect, like, what has been a takeaway of what we've talked about so far. We've been going for almost an hour here. What has been a takeaway for the conversations we've had so far? How you've seen me facilitate, some of the points you've seen people on the call make in the Jamboard or on the audio. Just want to pause here. Just for your own reflection. You don't have to share in the chat. It's really just for you to kind of tune in. Good. And thanks for adding things in the chat here, Kari, as well as Neil. And Jamie also is feeling that there's more options, like some inspiration of doing more things. Good. And get the engagement level up. I hear several people mentioning that as well. Excellent. So what I would like us to do now is to, because another thing I just want to highlight, and actually I want to just share the Padlet board. So for those of you who had a chance, and it doesn't matter if you didn't, it's okay, but I tried to kind of do a little bit of walk the talk here, as I sent a little video ahead of time for you guys to view if you had that opportunity. Open up a Padlet board for some of these conversations to start happening, right? So it was to kind of mirror what I'm talking about here. What can you put out in that asynchronous space? One of the things that's essential when we want to do this with our team, if we want to start having a stronger practice of having shorter meetings, more focused meetings, and utilizing that asynchronous space, is that we all get on board with it. Because if we are, and that means that people are really doing the prep, or they're really adding to those boards, that they're really viewing those articles or looking into those things that are shared prior to that meetings. Because if people are not doing that and just showing up to that one focused meeting where now we're making a decision, of course we can't make a decision if they haven't been part of that process that happened, and that exchange of ideas that happened in the asynchronous. So it's very important that we get our team on board with it, and that we're having either we put it on a collaboration agreement, or we're kind of agreeing that we want to experiment with this for the next 3 weeks or the next month, or that, but people are on board, because else it's going to fall flat. If only 10%, 20%, or even half of the people in the team are ready to dive into that during conversation and making that, as the example was, like making that decision, but haven't done the prep in the prior, then we're nowhere, right? So that's a big premise of that. I encourage you, for those of you who didn't have a chance to get into the Padlet board, that you can do that afterwards as well. I'll just put it in the chat right now, the link as well, if you didn't have a chance to go in there and see what some people were exchanging. But it was to kind of show that example of walking the talk in terms of what this looks like. Oh, oops, you can't see my, I'm gonna stop sharing. My slide is not correct. What's it called? Just 1 second. What was supposed to be in front, the question for you, was not in front. So I think that should be there now. Get back and share, because I want to make sure that you can see my. No, it's still like you still can't see it. Okay, what I want you to do, and that's actually what I can do instead, is I'm going to share in here. We're going to go back into the. We're going to go back into the Jamboard, and I'm just going to post that in our chat here. Bear with me as I'm finding links here. We're going to go back into the Jamboard, but we're going to go in breakout rooms. But what I want you to do is to, in each breakout, discuss how can this notion of synchronous and asynchronous support agile processes in your own team. So we want to still be focusing on, like, as the sixth principle is talking about, we need to be face-to-face. And we had different inputs of, like, yeah, is it still timely, is it not timely? But how can this notion of synchronous and asynchronous support the agile processes that you're having in your team, the agile collaborations that you're having in your team? So I want us to go in, and I'm going to stop sharing here because Neil, you're going to help me out. Let's do, we are 19 people. Let's do 4 groups, 4 breakout groups. Just randomly, and I can see we have a visitor over at Aspen's also that hopefully had an owie that's healed. But Neil, if you want to set us up in 4 breakouts, and then we're going to do 7 minutes for this conversation. Whatever breakout you are, pay attention to what number you are, and then in the Jamboard, you can start adding things as you're having your conversation. You don't have to, but it's a place so that you have a place to add any of the conversations that you're having. I would encourage you that I'll ask that each breakout find a spokesperson that's going to come back and just give a quick highlight of the conversation that you have in the breakout. So Neil, if you want to get us set up, and then I will put a timer on, and we'll give you a heads up when there is 2 minutes left of the conversation. But you're having 7 minutes in your breakouts. Neil, you on mute? Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you. Good. I think everyone got into the meetings okay. The breakout's okay. You're on mute right now.
It looks like it.
Yeah. So Jennifer, did you get bumped out? Do we need to put you into another group? Okay. So you might just sit this conversation. That's completely fine. Jennifer, let us know. You're on mute right now, but let us know if you need help to get back into a breakout. Oh, she has a grandma. No problem. Say hi to grandma. Good. Okay, is this what you wanted us to do? Is this hitting the spot?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah, no,
good.
This is perfect, and I love the fact that we had the wheel that you had for pre, post, and during the pre-post, pre, during, and post.
Yeah.
It really crystallized the idea of how you can get to a single agenda item for me, which I was struggling with before.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why I use that example. It's kind of a key example I use all the time, because I think that's a classical agenda, like, oh, we need to do this, this, and this. But let's be critical. Do we need to do that on Zoom, looking at each other and ourselves, right? Like, so good. So yeah. So.
Do we want to put notes in breakout 5 and have our own conversation?
We can. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that.
So synchronization and asynchronization allows us to, for one thing, have pre-post and
so say it again. I can type here for you. So
let's see. Here's what I was thinking. I managed to get it typed.
Yeah.
So it really gets us down to that focused. We're here to make a decision today because we've done all our pre-work. We've done our presentation ahead of time with video presenting what the idea was, what the issue is, how we propose to deal with it, or multiple recommendations. and options can be presented, and then we can come together and sit and look at the pros and cons and evaluate, okay, based on all this information that we've been provided, now we can get to the decision that we need to make.
Yeah. In your specific team, what do you think there would be? Would they be ready to do something like this, or what would need to have to be the prep to get them to get to the place where this could flow?
We'd have to enable video sharing, so a tool that we can record video on and present simultaneously. So you might have to have a personal WebEx meeting or a personal Zoom meeting or a personal Skype meeting, something that enables you to video yourself while you're presenting the presentation so that you could do asynchronous video and either store that video in a location where we could get it, or and I gotta watch the timer here because we're about to expire.
They've been in there 5 minutes, so you probably want to give them a heads up that they got 2 more minutes. Do you want to send that to them? So I just wrote in there, like, we need to have tools to record. One tool I use a lot is Loom, but also just setting up a Zoom meeting with yourself, right? And just record yourself. And that's super simple. But Loom is one of my favorites.
I hadn't heard of Loom. I'll have to.
So, and I can share a little bit about that also with everybody. But Loom makes it possible that you can use presenting. It's actually a lot. The teachers in my kids' school have used it a lot while they've been online schooling. So whatever you present, there's a little round video of you. So you're like presenting your slides, but then there's a little audio and video of you in the corner, so it becomes personal, but it's not like a big picture of yourself. It's really primarily your slides, and then you're just walking through those slides, but there's this little video in the corner, and it's super easy. It's a free tool. It's super easy to use. I use it a lot for my workshops. Anything that people have to prep or big content that I don't want to spend time on because I want to have time for discussion in the workshop, and then I send that out, like, view this 10-minute video, and then be ready to discuss it when you meet with us all, right? So we probably wanna close the meet. What do you have the timer for? Like that it's a minute before?
No, it's closing in 15 seconds.
Oh. Okay, perfect. So everyone's gonna come back.
They'll be coming back, yeah.
Good.
We're done talking.
Everyone's getting populated again. Welcome back.
Sorry. What happens when you set a timer?
That's it. Yeah. Good. So welcome back. Let's hear from the different groups. What were some conversations what were some interesting things that came up as you discussed here? Let's hear from the first group number 1.
Our group talked if I were to summarize it the most briefly, I would say we talked about meeting people kind of where they're at, and whether that's their learning styles, their communication styles, whether that's their energy levels, really being able to harness that time in between meetings to encourage the best work possible in between those face-to-face spaces, so to speak.
Yes, I just want to share some of the things anything that you had in your meeting here. Good. So that's like I like that, meet people where they're at, both in terms of energy, temperament, personality, and be more conscious of that. Yeah, good. Thank you. Let's hear from group number 2.
Ooh, first.
Yeah, wait for the next one.
Yeah. Well, we talked about how developers, the more time the developers spend in meetings, the more time they end up saying, well, I can't get any work done because I'm in too many meetings, which is common. So how, we were talking about, well, with the asynchronous part of that meeting process, the pre-part, would that work? And I was saying that if I sent my IT guys anything to do pre-meeting, they will just ignore me. It's the culture that I work for a university, and oh my gosh, it's just, it's just the culture.
And I think that's a very good point, that you can't just do this without context, and you need to have people on board, right? Yeah. Like you can show that model that I just showed you, right? Of like what could be the benefits, and typically like a carrot could be like, anyone here wants to have fewer meetings? Yeah, right? Like how could we do this? Here's one way we could do it. Do you want to try and experiment with this? And then I also think, like, when I work with team leads who really want to change, as you said, Zena, like this culture, right? Like been fairly I've definitely guided them to be fairly strict around, like, if you're then seeing this, a great way to see if people are doing it is to see, is there anything happening in that online board? Are there discussion happening? If not, then you're canceling the meeting. We're not ready to make a decision because no one has shared their reflection.
Right.
We'll have the meeting next week then. Like, so to kind of, like, if people are on board and they're agreeing, then saying, well, then we're really then we're going to follow this through, because there's no point of us joining this meeting if those conversations have not happened. Right. It's also a mindset we can start using with other colleagues or teams where we're maybe not in part of those teams, where we're being pulled into their meetings, that when we see we're like, oh, we want you to join our meeting to do this presentation. We're like, okay, do I need to be there for the whole meeting? Can I send a presentation? Can I send a recording of it? Can I send a slide deck? When is my presentation? Then I can be there for those 10 minutes. Or it might also, we need you to be there to represent blah, blah, blah. And we're like, I'm not sure I'm needed. Like, this person can give me the highlights, or where can I find the minutes from your meeting? It's another way to also start being critical of, when do I get pulled in, and start shaping the culture of our meeting cultures from the end of the receiver, and being like, I'm not sure I'm going to be part of this meeting. I need to know why I'm required there. And then kind of again tune into that focus. It seems like you guys want to do a lot with this meeting. How about if what you're asking me for is this, how about I send that out as a document, or I share that article or something, right? So great. Let's hear from group number 3, your conversations.
We had lots of conversations and little writing. That's
completely fine.
But I was describing my team is a small team, and we're in operations, so we get a lot of curveballs, and they prep for the demos, and mainly it's the meetings are their the standard Scrum ceremonies, but to try to get that's even like pulling teeth to get them to be prepared for it. So, and like like what I said to Kate is like, developers don't like paperwork. So I'm constantly nagging them about updating their stories. And because initially, when we first started, nobody knew how to do anything. So I ended up doing them. And then I had to teach them how to do it. And they didn't want to do it. Yeah. So, ideally, getting them, having them prepare more before we get to the meeting would be great, but I don't see it ever happening,
because they already had too much to do. There's already too much of like ceremonies and paperwork that needs to be done, right? Which comes down to a bigger conversation around what Agile has transformed into, right?
Yeah, and the pipeline broke
as well. Yeah. Good. Kate, anything that you want to add? You were part of that conversation.
We were just also discussing that it's hard, not only for others, but for ourselves when you're in meetings back to back. I find that now that we're online, if you weren't used to working that way, it's actually taking more time to create these presentations, to share the information, even though we have the tools out there. It just takes a little bit more finessing in how you share that information. And so now if you're doing that on top of being in meetings all day, on top of like having to read up on the next meeting, it's a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea with this was that we were like, oh, I have 3 meetings today. The rest of the time, I am just connecting with my colleagues and I'm doing my work, right? Like,
Sure.
And I think it's one piece that's important for us to remember is, I think most of us like to work with our colleagues because we can bounce ideas back and forth, and if we're looking at what we're spending our times on, is that collaborative space of bouncing ideas back and forth and solving issues, or is it being informed in meetings, right? And so I think that's part of the caveat, and that's part of that carrot of like, can we get back to doing the things that's lovely to do with our colleagues? So like, great, you're an expert on this. I want to work with you on this, and get more into what Neil was talking about, carving time out to do these peer-to-peer collaboration pieces, right? So Jamie, if you can say to your developer, oh, how about we have time for more of this, right? Like, you know, that's what because that's what they want. They don't want to do mock programming. They want to do these things together, like where they can nerd out together. So that's what we want to. That's what we're carving time for. So we also had a 4th group, right? Or no? Did we hear from everybody? Was there a 4th group?
There was.
There was. I don't think we wrote anything down.
Yeah. Jeff, are you the spokesperson, or?
Jeff or Dave?
Yeah, we had a lot of different conversation. I think, you know, for some, the formula doesn't really work as well. We talked a little bit about other cultures too, and their time to process. You know, sometimes that you know, certain meetings, depending on the meeting, it might may not fit that formula where you may not have the set of time set aside. You might get through it very quickly. So don't be so prescriptive, or you know, so. Be more flexible when it comes to reading your colleagues in the meeting and how to move things along.
Yeah.
And, so
good, thank you. And Neil, you had a couple of things that you want to pull from, because Neil and I ended up just having a little conversation here as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noted down was asynchronization allows us to have a meeting with a single agenda, whereas if we had to have a PowerPoint presentation and then we had to go through the pros and cons of the information that was presented, and then we had to make a decision, that's really 3 agenda items, and that to me was a revelation. But in order to establish that, now you've got to figure out, how do I introduce the right tools to the organization so that I can have video recording of somebody presenting, so that I can capture people's thoughts about the pros and cons of that presentation prior to the meeting, and then have it be coming together to make the decision as a team.
Yeah. And of course that means like there's another step of what we want to do, and I think that it kind of ties into one of my big points here, is that we have a tendency to be like, oh, we're online, it's business as usual. And if we were moving into a new office building, we would need to paint the walls, we would need to have chairs, we would need to have tables that could standing, and we would, you know, all these things. And some of the things that we're forgetting is that if we're working online, we need the tools, we need the mindset and the skill set to be in here, and that needs to be set up. And it may be, and so that's part of that conversation with our organization as well, like what tools do we have available? and do they play well with each other? And are we doing an analysis of what tools we're needing? You know, what's a good visualization tool? What's a good board tool? What's a good retrospective tool? What's a good communication hub, like a Slack or Yammer, or, you know, like it's a set of tools that we're needing, and they need to play together. And we can't just get stuck on like, oh, that's what we have, and then for the next 10 years we're fine. Like, tools are evolving and our needs are evolving, and part of working globally is that we're going to be out there working online and remotely, is that we're going to be out there on our toes, figuring that out and making new skill set and in that space, that we're never just kind of like done. But it's true, it requires more of us. It does require more of us. Personally, I really do feel that there can be, and it's been my experience with the work that I do, that it can also opens up a creative space for collaboration. There's a different team synergy that can happen if we manage to get these components in and we're conscious of them. And one tool that I just mentioned to Neil in our conversation in terms of how to record is Loom, if you don't know that already. A free tool, very simple, and it just means that if I'm presenting, I have a slide deck, or even I'm just looking at a website maybe and going through that website and pointing certain things out, I can start my Loom recording and then my audio, and then a little round circular video of myself is up in the corner. So whatever I'm presenting, I can actually, the teachers in my kids' classroom have been using Loom quite a bit in their online class stuff for my middle schooler and also my high schooler. But as Kari is saying, also, you can just set up a Zoom meeting with yourself, right? And just record it, and then very easily edit it if there's a little in the beginning, a little in the end that you want to weave out. Super simple. And then you just upload it and people can share it, can view it, right? So it doesn't have to be complicated. Good. Well, thank you. We have another 5 minutes for any kind of question that pops up. It's kind of a little bit broad, our conversation, but I want to make sure that we just kind of hosted that conversation. I had some input, but I also want to make sure that we had a broad conversation. Final kind of thoughts of what this has triggered for you, aha moments, little takeaways.
My first thought was I have a lot of work to do.
Don't be overwhelmed. Take a chunk. Let him make a little experiment of a fun piece of it.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good thing because it opens up more, like I said, more options that I hadn't thought of yet. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, good.
I think it was brought up earlier, but don't underestimate that. There's virtual meetings right now, and then there's stay at home. It's like there's, part of it is we're trying to get through this time, this space, and it has a psychological effect on us too. So if your meetings aren't going the way that you want, it's maybe not the meeting, it may be your mindset kind of where you are right now, or where your team, be mindful where your teammates are. So I hear a lot of that right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I would say that when we're moving into our next phase in terms of collaboration and also next phases of this pandemic, there's going to be more what we call hybrid teams, right? Like some people are back in the office, others are going to be online. Some organizations are going to have a lot more flexibilities of working online from home. So some people are going to choose that. So the future of our teams are going to be a lot more hybrid. So that's where more immediately is where we're going to be. It'll be like, okay, we're going to do online, but some people are going to be in the office together. How are we going to make sure that gets good alignment? Yeah. Good. Some other thoughts?
I think the best you can try to understand other people's perspective of what they're doing, what their situation is. Forced collaboration isn't always the best thing. And, you know, the idea, the example of the video, you know, you put something I want you to have the video on. Some people hate it. Are you going to shut that person down if you force them into the video, even for 5 minutes? You know, there's no perfect world, but in a true creative and innovative thinking, try little things, experiment, take little small steps forward and see what works, but definitely try to have a little empathy on the end user side.
Yeah. I think it's very, very true. Forced collaboration don't get us anywhere, right? So we need to make sure that what we're proposing is an invitation, right? And then we might make people curious and be like, oh, I wonder what's in that video. I'm gonna have to click that. Or, oh, she's doing this interesting thing where she's using her video for people to show post-it notes. Oh, I'm gonna turn on my video at least for that little activity, and then I can turn off again, right? You know, that there's ways that we can make it an invitation instead of a demand and something that's forced. I think that's very essential. And very essential at this time where a lot of us are also thinking about how can we make sure that how we're collaborating is as inclusive as possible in all ranges of inclusiveness. And that's where invitation is important, that it becomes invitation.
And the other side of that, take a chance, be bold.
Yes, yeah, good. Thanks, John.
You bet.
Good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope I see you all in other Agile PDX context or in other meetups or other stuff that's going on in our Portland workspace at conferences or other spaces. So thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciated you coming out tonight and facilitating the discussion. It was great.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.